There's a moment near the start of this movie that a lot of people laugh at and then forget about. A little kid, maybe 5 years old, squatting down in a school hallway and pressing his face into the backside of a very confused school principal. Yeah, that happens. And the thing is, it makes complete sense. That's what I love about this opening. It doesn't play as random, gross-out humor. It plays as the most logical thing in the world, given what this child has just been told. Let's go back. It's 1968, San Francisco, and there's a 5-year-old named John Dolittle who has, as far as he's concerned, a perfectly normal relationship with his dog. They talk, like actually talk. The dog has opinions. The dog has explanations. John asks questions and the dog answers them, and that's just how things are in John's world because he's 5 and 5-year-olds haven't yet been told which things are supposed to be impossible. One of the first things young John wants to know is why dogs sniff each other's backsides when they meet. It's a reasonable question, honestly. It's the kind of thing every kid has probably wondered and then gotten shushed about. The dog's answer is completely matter-of-fact. That's just how dogs greet each other. It's the same as a handshake for humans. It's polite. It's how you say hello. John takes this in. John thinks about this. And then John meets his new school principal. What happens next is one of those movie moments that's technically slapstick, but is also, if you sit with it for half a second, a surprisingly earnest portrait of a kid who genuinely believes what he's been told. He's not trying to be funny, he's not acting out. He's greeting this authority figure the way his most trusted friend explained, "You're supposed to greet someone." He doesn't understand why everyone around him immediately loses their minds. But they do, and suddenly John's dog, this dog he talks to every single day, this dog who is functionally his best friend, is at the center of a problem. His father, Archer Dolittle, played by Ossie Davis, is a man of his time and his community. He's not cruel, he's not dismissive, but he is deeply, visibly unsettled. His son is talking to animals. His son is performing dog greeting rituals on school administrators. This is not normal, and in 1968, in the community Archer moves through, not normal carries real weight. So Archer does what a lot of worried parents in a lot of movies do when they've run out of rational explanations. He calls in the minister. The exorcism scene is played broadly. There's comedy in it. There's a whole theatrical energy to the minister arriving with his Bible and his solemn face. But underneath the laughs, there's something real happening. Archer is scared for his son, not angry. Scared. He doesn't know what this gift is, and because he doesn't understand it, the only framework he has for it is that it must be wrong. Something to be driven out, something to be fixed. John, meanwhile, is just terrified. He doesn't understand why his father has invited this man into their home to perform some kind of ritual over him. He doesn't understand what he's done wrong. He was just talking to his dog. He was just being himself. And then the dog intervenes. The dog attacks the minister, goes after him, puts himself between this stranger and John. And in a weird way, it's the most loyal thing any character does in this entire movie. The dog is protecting his kid. That's it. That's the whole calculation, but the consequence is brutal, in the way that only something that happens in childhood can be brutal. Archer gives the dog away, not out of malice, not even as punishment, out of fear and out of a misguided need to cut the problem off at the source. If John keeps talking to animals, if the animals keep responding to John, then the animals need to go. It's the kind of decision that makes a terrible kind of sense in the moment and leaves wreckage for decades. Watch the kid's face when it happens. Young John doesn't yell. He doesn't throw a tantrum. He just goes very still in that way children go still when something too big to process has just happened to them. His best friend is gone because of what John is, because of this thing that lives inside him that he didn't ask for, didn't choose, and doesn't even fully understand yet. And so he makes a decision, a conscious, deliberate 5-year-old decision. He is going to stop. He's going to close that door and bolt it shut and never open it again. If this gift is what costs him the people he loves, the dog, his father's comfort, the life he had before all of this, then the gift isn't worth having. That's the prologue. Less than 10 minutes of screen time. But it's doing a lot of work. Because here's the thing. The whole movie is about a man trying to reconnect with something he lost when he was 5 years old. Not just the ability to talk to animals, but the version of himself who thought that was beautiful and normal, rather than terrifying and inconvenient. The story isn't really about a doctor who can communicate with other species. It's about a man who learned too early that being fully himself comes with a price, and who spent 30 years paying that price by not being himself at all. And what does that look like in a grown adult? It looks like a perfectly constructed, carefully controlled life with no room in it for chaos, for wonder, or for anything that can't be explained by a medical textbook. It looks like John Dolittle in 1998. That transition, from the warm, slightly grainy 1968 footage to the sharp, busy world of modern San Francisco, is a nice piece of visual storytelling. The color palette changes, the noise changes, everything is faster, slicker, and more certain of itself. 30 years have passed. John has become exactly what he set out to become, a respected physician, a surgeon, a man of science and reason, and absolutely zero time for anything he can't explain. The dog that knew him is gone. The version of him that listened is gone. What's left is Dr. John Dolittle, and he is running very late for a very important meeting. That's where we're headed next. San Francisco, 1998. 30 years later, and John Dolittle is exactly the kind of man you'd expect a 5-year-old who decided to stop feeling things to become. He's a physician, a good one, the kind with a spotless office, a firm handshake, and a voice that makes anxious patients exhale without him even trying. His practice is doing well, his reputation is solid. The life, from the outside, looks like the product of serious work and serious choices. The problem with lives that look perfect from the outside is that sometimes that's exactly where the perfection stops. Meet Mark Weller. Oliver Platt plays him with this precise combination of genuine warmth and total moral flexibility. Mark isn't a villain, that's the interesting thing about him. He's a friend. He and John have built this practice together over years, and there's real affection between them. But Mark is also, at his core, a man who knows what things are worth in dollars and is completely at peace with that fact. The offer on the table is from a businessman named Calloway, Peter Boyle, playing the kind of polished corporate charmer who believes that monetizing healthcare is just sound strategy. No malice, just math. Calloway wants to absorb their medical practice into a larger health management organization. The payout would be significant. Mark wants to take it. John is less enthusiastic. This dynamic is set up fast, but it matters. Because what's actually being asked isn't just a business question, it's a values question. Do you practice medicine because you care about people or because it pays? Mark and John have managed to coexist professionally while quietly holding different answers to that. The Calloway deal is just the moment where the gap between those answers gets too wide to step over. John votes to sit on it for now. Mark smiles, the smile of a man who's already mentally spent his share. Go home with John. The Dolittle household is loud in the best way. Lisa, played by Kristen Wilson, is the emotional spine of this family. Sharp, warm, genuinely funny, and possessing exactly zero tolerance for evasion. She and John have a real marriage. You can tell because they argue the way people who actually know each other argue, not the way movie couples fight when the script needs tension. She's not a prop. She's not decorating the background. Lisa is the person John most needs to be honest with, and the person he's been quietly lying to for years, not about facts, but about how he actually feels. Carice, the older daughter, is at absolute peak teenage mortification. Kyla Pratt plays her with a very specific brand of parental embarrassment, the kind where every choice her dad makes is a personal offense. His clothes, his jokes, the fact that he exists in spaces where her friends could potentially see him. Carice's whole arc over the course of this movie is basically a slow walk from, I cannot be related to this man, to, okay, fine, I'm related to this man, and that's actually okay. Right now, though, she's firmly in phase 1. Maya is different, younger, quieter, operating entirely on her own frequency. Raven Simonet brings this matter-of-fact quality to her. Maya isn't trying to be adorable. She's just genuinely, unself-consciously fascinated by animals and creatures in a way that seems to have arrived from nowhere, given how her father feels about them. Right now, Maya is convinced she is successfully incubating a swan egg. The egg is not a swan egg, but Maya is not in the business of accepting doubt. She also owns Rodney the guinea pig. Rodney, voiced by Chris Rock, is small, loud, and operating under the absolute certainty that he is a cherished member of this household. He has opinions about everything. He shares them freely. He has no concept of an appropriate moment. John's position on all animals, collectively? No. Hard. No. Part of it's allergies. He sneezes around anything with fur, and that inconvenience alone would be enough for most people. But there's something more deliberate about the way he holds animals at arm's length. He'd never connect the dots himself, never trace it back to anything. But somewhere beneath all that controlled, reasonable adulthood, animals still carry the weight of a specific loss. A dog that got taken away, a version of himself that went quiet the day his father handed that dog off to someone else. He doesn't think about that, hasn't thought about it in 30 years. What he thinks about is that Rodney is a health concern. The swan egg is going to devastate Maya when it turns out to be a rock, and they really should take a vacation because he needs to clear his head before making any decisions about Calloway. The vacation gets agreed to. The cabin. The family is going to the cabin, and Maya's bringing Rodney. One thing the movie earns here in this setup section is that it never lets John tip into unlikable territory. He's not dismissive in a way that signals he needs punishing. He's not cold in the way movie characters are cold when they're being set up as the lesson learner. What he reads as is just sealed. A man who made himself smaller a long time ago to survive something he didn't understand, and then stayed small so long that it stopped feeling like a constraint. It just felt like personality. There's a moment, easy to miss if you're not watching for it, where John says, almost offhandedly, that medicine used to excite him, that there was a time when the idea of solving a difficult diagnosis felt like the greatest thing imaginable. It doesn't feel that way anymore. He's competent, he shows up, he does the work, but the spark that was there at the beginning, whatever made him want to go into medicine in the first place, has gone somewhere he can't find. That quiet absence is the real setup of this story. Not a comedy premise. Not an Eddie Murphy vehicle with animal voice cameos, though it's also those things. The engine underneath everything is a man who's been running on fumes for years and doesn't even fully know it yet. Road trip. The car is packed. There's luggage, a guinea pig carrier, a supposed swan egg, and one family dog that Lisa apparently allowed Carisse to bring without fully clearing it with John first. John is behind the wheel. John is already tired. Rodney is in the back, chatting constantly at Maya, the way guinea pigs apparently do when they feel comfortable, which is to say non-stop, about nothing in particular, with enormous confidence. John can't hear it. The door has been closed since 1968, and it is not swinging open for a suburban road trip to a rental cabin. That's what he thinks, anyway. It starts with Rodney, not a dramatic moment. Not a thunderclap or a cinematic swell of music signaling that everything is about to change. Just a small brown guinea pig in a travel carrier in the back seat of an SUV, talking. Casually. The way you'd chat to someone sitting next to you on a long flight when you've run out of things to look at on your phone. John hears it. At first, he doesn't register what he's hearing. It's road noise, it's the radio, it's Maya talking to the animal the way kids talk to pets, projecting words onto little creature sounds. That's what the brain does. It finds the rational explanation first and grabs it with both hands. John's brain is particularly good at this. He's had 30 years of practice. But Rodney keeps going, and at some point, with the highway stretching out ahead and the family half asleep in their seats, John catches a specific sentence. Specific words, an actual grammatical structure with a subject and a verb and a complaint about the carrier being too small for someone of his personality. John's hands tighten on the wheel. He glances in the rearview mirror. Maya is oblivious, staring out her window. Lisa is reading. Carissa has headphones on, sealed off from the universe. Nobody else reacts. Nobody else hears a thing. Rodney is still talking. You know that feeling when you're the only person in a room who notices something, and the noticing itself starts to feel like the problem? Like maybe the issue isn't the thing you noticed. Maybe the issue is that you're the one who noticed it. That's John right now in the driver's seat. He changes the radio station, turns it up slightly, focuses on the road with the deliberate, iron concentration of a man who has decided he did not hear what he just heard. Rodney comments on the music choice. By the time they reach the stretch of road outside the city, John is vibrating with a kind of focused denial that takes genuine effort to maintain. He's a doctor. He knows what auditory hallucinations are. He knows what stress can do to perception. He's been working too hard. The Calloway deal, the practice, the sleepless nights running patient charts, and it's catching up with him. That's all this is. Sleep deprivation and stress wearing a very specific costume. He genuinely believes this, which is, honestly, kind of impressive. 3 seconds. That's roughly how long it takes for the stray dog to appear in the road. The SUV swerves. John yanks the wheel. The car skids to a stop on the shoulder, everyone lurching forward, Lisa reaching an arm out in that automatic parental reflex that does absolutely nothing but still gets triggered every single time. Silence in the car. Heavy breathing. The dog is fine. standing in the road, completely unrattled, watching them with the calm entitlement of an animal who believes the road belongs equally to everyone and frankly thinks the humans were driving too fast anyway. Then the dog opens his mouth and says something along the lines of, "Watch where you're going, not friendly, not grateful." The full energy of someone who has almost been flattened and feels that the near flattening was your fault specifically. John stares through the windshield. Lisa asks if he's okay. John says, "Yes, completely fine, totally fine. He just needs a second." The dog sits down in the road and waits because he is clearly not done. Lucky, which is what he'll eventually be called, the name arriving with a certain irony given how this introduction went, is a stray, scruffy. The kind of dog who has clearly been managing his own affairs for a while and has developed opinions about everything as a result. Norm Macdonald's voice performance gives him this flat, unimpressed quality, like a guy who's heard every excuse and isn't buying any of them. He's not aggressive. He's just not going to pretend the near miss didn't happen just because the human behind the wheel would prefer to move on. John would very much prefer to move on. Instead, he's standing on the side of the road in the middle of a family vacation, having what appears to the rest of his family to be a one-sided conversation with a stray dog, gesturing, muttering, checking over his shoulder, while Lisa watches from the passenger window with the specific expression of a woman filing something away for a conversation she's going to need to have soon. The dog ends up in the car. Nobody is quite sure how that happens. John will tell you it was a temporary measure, a stopgap. The dog needed water, the dog had a cut on his paw that warranted attention. It was a brief humanitarian pause that in no way implied any ongoing commitment. Lucky would tell you differently. Lucky would tell you John invited him. They would disagree on this point for some time. At the cabin, the animals find him. That's the thing about a gift like this. Once the door cracks, it doesn't ease open politely. It blows off its hinges. An injured owl lands near John while he's sitting on the porch trying to collect himself. A raccoon wanders over with something going on with its leg. There's a moment where John looks up and realizes there are more animals at the edge of the tree line than there probably should be, all oriented in his direction, and the look on his face is not wonder, it's dread. Pure, practical dread. He helps the owl. Not because he decides to. It kind of happens, his hands moving into a diagnostic mode before his brain finishes the argument. He examines the wing, figures out what's wrong, fixes what he can with what he has, and when the owl thanks him, actually, verbally, in a full sentence, John puts his face in his hands and sits there for a long moment. Lucky settles next to him on the step. "You're not losing your mind," the dog says, or something to that effect. "Matter of fact," the tone of someone clarifying a factual misunderstanding. John tells him he didn't ask. Lucky points out that John has been operating under a misapprehension and he thought the information might be useful. What begins here, reluctantly, on John's side completely against his will, is the closest thing to a friendship John Dolittle has formed with anyone in a long time. Because Lucky doesn't need anything from John except honesty. Doesn't need him to be impressive or competent or the person his father wanted him to be, or the partner Mark needs for this Callaway deal, or the calm, authoritative presence his patients expect. Lucky just says what he observes. He's difficult to perform for. John is, it turns out, exhausted from performing. The drive home is quieter than the drive out. The family is sun-tired, satisfied. The cabin was good. Even John relaxed incrementally by about the second day. Lucky is still in the car. Temporary, John has said multiple times. Lisa has not pushed back. She's seen the way the dog parks himself near John. She's noticed John talking. Not to them, not on his phone, just talking, quietly, in the evenings on the porch. She's choosing, for now, to observe rather than interrogate. Rodney, from his carrier, has already fully accepted Lucky as a cohabitant and has moved on to telling him about the best spots in the Dolittle kitchen. Lucky listens with the patience of someone who has slept outside in the rain and can now see a warm house in his immediate future. John drives. San Francisco gets closer. And somewhere behind the careful, practiced face John shows the world, something that's been locked up since 1968 is pacing. Not threatening, not demanding, just awake, present in a way it hasn't been in 30 years. The door is open. Nothing is going back through it. Word travels fast in the animal world. This is played as comedy, and it is funny. The idea that there's some kind of underground network of birds and squirrels and neighborhood dogs passing along the information, that there's a human in the Richmond district who can actually hear you and also has medical training. But underneath the joke is something that works for the story too. John didn't seek any of this out. He helped one owl on a cabin porch because his hands acted before his brain could object. And now the owl told the raccoon, told the crow, told the pigeon, and suddenly John Dolittle's morning commute looks like a scene from a nature documentary. By Tuesday, there's a dog waiting outside his front door before he's had coffee. Not Lucky. Lucky is inside, on what John still officially refers to as a temporary sleeping arrangement that has now lasted 3 weeks. This is a different dog, a stranger, sitting on the front step with the patient certainty of someone who was told to be here at 8 and showed up at 7:45 just to be safe. John looks at the dog looks at John. John goes back inside and pours himself more coffee and stands at the kitchen window for a long moment and then goes back out and asks the dog what's wrong. The pigeon is the one that actually breaks him, not emotionally. That comes later. But the pigeon is the moment where John stops pretending this is a phase that will resolve itself if he ignores it hard enough. It shows up at his office, third-floor medical building, window that shouldn't even open fully. This pigeon has committed. It's got a wing issue that it describes in terms that are surprisingly clinically accurate, and it keeps interrupting John between patient appointments. And at one point, John is mid-consultation with an actual human patient who has real insurance and an 11 o'clock appointment, and the pigeon is on the windowsill offering a running commentary. John excuses himself. He goes to the window. He and the pigeon have what looks, to anyone watching from the hallway, like an intense private conversation between a respected physician and a bird. His receptionist sees this. She doesn't say anything. She absolutely files it away. So John starts keeping a list. Not officially, he's not writing it down anywhere, but mentally cataloging the situations he's now navigating simultaneously, his human patients, his practice, the Callaway decision still hanging in the air, and this steadily growing side practice that he never agreed to open and cannot figure out how to close. He's treating animals. Not at a clinic, not with proper equipment, improvising mostly. A cat with an infected paw gets seen in the alley behind the building during his lunch break. A neighborhood dog with an ear situation gets examined in the garage. He sutures a wound on a raccoon using supplies he definitely should not be removing from work, and he knows this, and he does it anyway. The justification he gives himself is that it's temporary. Once things settle down, once he figures out what's actually happening neurologically, because he still hasn't entirely let go of the stress response theory, even though it's getting harder to maintain. He'll get things back under control. Lucky finds this hilarious, not in a mean way. It's just that Lucky is in a position of having watched John perform this particular mental gymnastics routine for going on a month now, and the gap between what John tells himself and what John actually does has become a reliable source of entertainment. John says he's a people doctor. John then spends 40 minutes on a Saturday examining a neighbor's arthritic cat with more genuine focus than he's brought to a patient chart in years. "You know you're enjoying this," Lucky says, somewhere in here. John tells him that's not the point. Lucky, wisely, doesn't argue. He just settles onto the floor with the expression of someone who is perfectly happy to wait. The confession happens on a Wednesday evening. Lisa is at her sister's. The girls are upstairs. John is in the kitchen, technically reviewing patient files, actually just sitting very still while Lucky occupies the rug nearby. And at some point, in the particular silence of a house where everyone's gone quiet at once, John says, not dramatically, barely above a conversational volume, that he doesn't remember the last time a diagnosis felt like something other than a task to complete. Lucky doesn't respond immediately, which is the right instinct. John keeps going. How medicine used to feel like a puzzle, not just a job, but a genuine problem to solve, and he was good at it, and being good at it meant something to him. How somewhere in the last several years, the solving started feeling mechanical. Show up, assess, prescribe, repeat. Not because the patients stopped mattering, but because John stopped being fully present with them, stopped listening, if you want to get specific about the word choice. Lucky, when he does respond, asks something like, "When's the last time you did something because it actually interested you?" John's silence is the answer. This is a small scene, maybe 2 minutes of screen time, if that. But it's the most honest John has been with another living creature since he was 5 years old on a back porch talking to a dog who answered back. And the fact that the creature he's being honest with is, again, a dog, that's not an accident. That's the movie knowing exactly what it's doing. Here's what the movie doesn't do in this section, which I appreciate. It doesn't make the animal conversations feel like a magic fix. John isn't suddenly healed because Lucky gave him a pep talk. He's still confused, still resistant, still showing up to work the next morning and telling himself the whole thing will normalize soon. The gift is back, but it hasn't solved anything. If anything, it's added a dozen new complications to a life that was already straining at the seams. Carice has a theory. She shares it with Maya in the way older siblings share theories, with the air of someone delivering a formal assessment of observable data. Dad is having some kind of crisis. The dog is involved. Something happened on the vacation. Maya listens carefully and then returns to her egg, which she has now named Gerald. Lisa, meanwhile, is watching. She's good at this. Watching without confronting, gathering information, waiting for the moment when a conversation will actually land. She's noticed John coming home with grass stains that don't correspond to any activity he's mentioned. She's found bandaging supplies in quantities that suggest something other than normal household use. She asked once, casually, whether there was anything he wanted to talk about. John said no. Lisa nodded in the way she nods when she's logging the answer and plans to revisit the question. The animals keep coming! And the strangest part, the part John won't admit yet, is that the practice isn't chaos anymore. It started as chaos. That first week back from the cabin was genuinely overwhelming, a constant barrage of creatures in various states of need, and he handled it poorly, and he told several birds in terms he's not proud of that he was off duty and they needed to come back later. But he's finding a rhythm now. The morning dog gets seen before breakfast. The lunch break goes to whoever turned up overnight. Evenings, if he's quick, he can check in on the longer-term cases. The cat whose infection is clearing up, the raccoon who's almost healed. Lucky gives him updates when he's been gone all day. It still isn't what he'd choose. It still isn't logical. He's still a people doctor who never asked for this and doesn't fully believe it's real even while he's doing it. But his hands don't feel mechanical when he's doing it. The puzzle feeling is back. The thing he described to Lucky in the kitchen on that Wednesday evening. The thing that used to make medicine feel like more than a job. It's back because the cases are new. The patients communicate in ways no textbook covered, and every diagnosis is a problem he's never technically been trained to solve. He's the most interested he's been in medicine in years. That's the part he's not ready to say out loud yet. Jake is a tiger who has given up. Not dramatically, not in a movie villain monologue kind of way, just quietly, incrementally, in the way living things sometimes do when the pain gets long enough and the relief stays far enough away. He's a circus tiger, has been his whole life, and somewhere in the last several months he stopped performing, stopped eating properly, stopped doing much of anything except lying in his enclosure with his head down and his eyes doing that thing eyes do when the owner of them isn't really tracking what they're looking at anymore. The circus handlers are worried. The people who manage the circus are worried. A psychiatric specialist gets brought in because apparently tiger psychology is a real professional lane, and the specialist's assessment is that Jake is depressed, clinically. The pressures of captivity, the repetitive performance schedule, the lack of environmental stimulation, all of it has compounded into a genuine psychological collapse. The prescription is rest. Environmental enrichment, reduced performance demands. Jake keeps deteriorating. Nobody calls John about Jake. That's not how it happens. Lucky hears about it through the network, the same informal animal communication pipeline that's been sending clients to John's back alley practice for weeks. Word got passed along. There's a tiger at a local circus who's in bad shape, who can talk but hasn't had anyone to talk to, and would John please come and just listen? John's response to this request is, initially, a firm explanation of his professional scope. Lucky waits him out. John goes to see the tiger. The circus is smaller than you'd expect, not the grand three-ring spectacle the word conjures, more of a touring operation that sets up in parking lots and fairgrounds. Jake's enclosure is off to the side, separated from the main area. The handlers are professional, careful, clearly fond of him even while being baffled by him. They let John in because he's a doctor, and doctors carry a kind of ambient authority that tends to open doors even when nobody's quite sure why they're letting you through. Albert Brooks voices Jake, and this casting is genuinely inspired. Brooks has always been brilliant at a very specific flavor of exhausted, sardonic intelligence, the voice of a man who has thought about his situation from every angle and found no angle that feels good. Jake sounds like that. Not manic, not melodramatic, just tired in a very particular way, the way you get tired when you've been trying to communicate something important to people who keep misunderstanding you on purpose. He's surprised John can hear him, more than surprised, actually. He goes quiet for a moment in a way that feels less like suspicion and more like a man who's been shouting into a room for months and suddenly, unexpectedly, gets a response. He doesn't quite know what to do with it, so he starts talking. 2 minutes with Jake, and John knows something is wrong physically. Not just emotionally, not just psychologically, structurally wrong. The headaches Jake describes are crushing, not the dull background ache of stress or depression. The vision disturbances come and go without pattern. There are moments of disorientation that aren't behavioral, that don't track with mood or environment or anything the psychiatric framework would predict. Jake can tell the difference. He's been living in his own body long enough to know that this pain isn't sadness wearing a physical costume. He's told the handlers. They've noted it. The specialist has it in the report. Jake sometimes presses his head against the enclosure wall, which is interpreted as a stress behavior, a displacement activity. Nobody has ordered imaging. Nobody has looked inside. John listens to all of this with the focused stillness he gets when a diagnostic picture is assembling itself in his mind. The way he used to listen, back when medicine was a puzzle. He asks Jake questions the specialist never thought to ask, because the specialist was working from an assumption and Jake couldn't correct him. By the time John walks out of that enclosure, he's convinced blood clot. Somewhere in the cerebrovenous system, the great cerebral vein is his best guess, based on the symptom pattern, pressing on the brain, building pressure, causing pain that looks like depression because pain always looks like something else when nobody's listening closely enough. What follows is a masterclass in how quickly professional credibility evaporates when you say something nobody wants to hear. John brings this theory to the circus management. They appreciate his concern, they really do, but they have a specialist, a qualified specialist with credentials and a report and a treatment plan currently in progress. A people doctor wandering in and announcing a neurological condition in a tiger is not exactly a peer review situation. John goes to a veterinary colleague. The response is more polite but arrives at the same destination. Tigers don't present with cerebral venous thrombosis in this pattern. The symptom cluster is more consistent with behavioral pathology. And furthermore, how exactly did John arrive at this diagnosis, given that he hasn't done any imaging and is not, again, a veterinarian? John tries Mark. Mark's response is shorter. Something in the neighborhood of, "John, you diagnosed a tiger based on a conversation you had with the tiger, and you'd like me to help you pursue this." The problem, and this is the genuinely uncomfortable part of this section, is that everyone who pushes back isn't wrong, exactly, from where they're standing. John's evidence base is a conversation that only he can verify happened. His diagnostic method is one he cannot explain to another physician without sounding like a man who should not be practicing medicine. The conclusion he's reached may be completely correct, but the path he took to reach it is indefensible in any professional context. He knows this. Jake knows this. Jake, when John comes back to tell him that the options are narrowing, takes it with the quiet acceptance of someone who has been at the bottom of this situation for a while and has made a certain peace with the floor. He's not bitter. He's not angry at John for not being able to fix it faster. He just says something like, "I appreciate that you came back," which for some reason is the line that hits hardest. There's a tonal tightrope this section of the movie walks that I think deserves credit. Jake's storyline could easily tip into either pure comedy, funny depressed tiger, Chris Rock one-liners nearby, keep it light, or into something so heavy it breaks the tone of the whole film. Betty Thomas keeps it balanced. Jake is genuinely sad in a way that lands, in a way that makes you invested in his outcome, but the movie never forgets it's also a comedy and finds ways to hold both things at once. Part of that is Albert Brooks's performance. There's a dry wit to Jake even at his lowest, a line here, an observation there, delivered with the timing of someone who has decided that if this is how things are going, he may as well be funny about it. It keeps the character from becoming a tragedy prop. Jake has agency. Jake has a perspective. He's not just a plot device for John's arc, even though he is also, structurally, a plot device for John's arc. The deeper thing Jake represents, and the movie earns this without ever stating it directly, is what happens when nobody listens. The headache gets called depression. The physical pain gets called a behavioral issue. The thing that's actually killing you gets misidentified because the people responsible for your care are working from the wrong framework, and there's no mechanism for you to correct them. John spent 30 years in a version of that situation. Different stakes, different scale, but the same fundamental experience of having something real inside you that the people around you couldn't see. Two creatures who've both been misread, sitting across from each other in a circus enclosure. Jake's running out of time and John's running out of options, and neither of them can fully articulate what comes next. But John is not going to stop pushing. That much is clear. Whatever it costs him professionally, whatever Mark thinks, whatever the specialist report says, he's not walking away from this one. The rat is what does it. Not the pigeon, not the back alley cat surgeries, not the increasingly difficult to explain supply shortages at the practice, or the conversations Lucky and John have been having in the kitchen at midnight. Or the 3 separate occasions where John has shown up to a family dinner distracted by something that, when pressed, he describes as work stuff. All of that has been accumulating, but none of it crystallized into a moment Lisa and Mark could point to. The rat crystallizes. John is in the middle of performing CPR on it. A full resuscitation effort, focused, methodical, because the rat had a cardiac event and asked for help, and John's hands were already moving before the rest of him caught up. He's kneeling on the floor of his home office, 2 fingers pressing rhythmic compressions on a chest the size of a coin purse, talking to the rat in the calm, reassuring voice he uses with patients who are frightened. Lisa is in the doorway. Mark is just behind her, having stopped by to discuss, again, the Calloway timeline. The silence that follows is the kind that fills a room completely, the kind where everyone present is processing what they're looking at, and none of the available explanations feel adequate. John looks up. He can see it in their faces, both of them. Not anger. That would almost be easier. What's on Lisa's face is fear, genuine and unguarded, the kind she can't compose herself past quickly enough to hide. What's on Mark's is something more complicated, a man recalibrating who exactly his partner is, running the last several weeks back through his memory and finding more things than he realized he'd been ignoring. The rat, for what it's worth, survives. Nobody mentions this. Lisa has been patient, more patient than most people would manage, but patience has a load-bearing limit, and this is where hers gives way. The conversation that follows is not a fight, exactly. It's quieter than a fight. She isn't yelling. She's sitting across from John in the kitchen, hands folded on the table, speaking in the careful, measured tone of someone who has loved a person long enough to know that volume isn't the point. She's scared. She says that directly. She says she doesn't know what's happening to him, and that's the part that frightens her most. Not the behavior, but the not knowing. She can work with facts. She can't work with a mystery she keeps catching glimpses of and then losing. John, to his credit, tries. He tries to explain the animals, the talking, the fact that Lucky isn't just a dog to him, the fact that the owl on the porch was real, the fact that Jake the tiger has a blood clot pressing on his brain and will die if nobody operates. He puts all of it on the table. Lisa listens to every word. Then she asks Mark to make a call. The psychiatric facility is calm in the specific way. Places like that are calm, deliberately, architecturally calm, as if the building itself has been designed to communicate that everything here is under control. John gets a room on the 2nd floor. Room 12B. There's a window. The window looks out onto a small courtyard where birds occasionally land, which, given the circumstances, is either the universe being cruel or the universe being funny. John hasn't decided which. The psychiatrist assigned to him is thorough and genuinely kind. She doesn't talk down to him. She takes his history seriously, asks the right questions, creates space for him to share whatever he wants to share. John, sitting across from her, understands with the cold clarity of a physician evaluating another physician's approach that she is excellent at her job. He also understands, with equal clarity, that her framework does not have a category for what's actually happening to him. So he gives her what she needs to hear. Measured, cooperative. The stress of the practice, the Calloway decision, some difficulty sleeping. Yes, he can see now that perhaps he let things get on top of him. He says the right things in the right order with the right affect. Because he spent 30 years learning to give people the version of himself they could process, and the skill doesn't disappear just because he's now using it in a psychiatric evaluation. She notes that he's making excellent progress. He stares at the ceiling at 2 a.m. and listens to a pigeon on the windowsill tell him there's a dog downstairs who wants to know if he's okay. Room 12B has a window and Lucky finds it. Not the 2nd floor window, that's too high. But there's a ground level window near the common room that apparently has a loose latch. And Lucky, who is proven across this entire movie to be a creature of considerable practical intelligence, works it out. He can't get inside, but he can get close enough to the glass that John, on a late-night walk down the corridor, spots him. They sit on either side of the window for a while. Lucky doesn't deliver a rousing speech. He doesn't tell John everything is going to be fine, or that he just needs to believe in himself, or any of the things a lesser version of this movie would have the dog say here. He just stays. Which, when you think about it, is the thing John has spent his whole life not being given enough of. Someone who stays, without conditions, without requiring him to be anything other than what he currently is. John asks about Jake. Lucky tells him Jake is getting worse. John nods slowly and puts his hand flat against the glass, and Lucky pushes his nose against the other side of it, and the whole exchange lasts maybe 90 seconds and carries more emotional weight than most films manage in a full act. Archer drives himself. He doesn't call ahead, doesn't coordinate with Lisa, doesn't arrive as part of an organized family visit. He just shows up one afternoon. Ossie Davis carrying the full, quiet dignity he brings to everything, and sits down across from his son with the look of a man who has been having a very long internal conversation and has finally reached the part where it needs to become external. He knows, Archer says, has known since John was 5, the dog, the principal. The way young John could hear things Archer himself couldn't, and the fear that rose up in him when he realized it. Not fear of John, but fear for him. Fear of what it would mean for his son to move through the world carrying something nobody else could see or understand. Taking the dog away was supposed to protect John. He's understood, somewhere in the years since, that it didn't protect him. It just taught him that the thing living inside him was dangerous. That love and that gift couldn't coexist without one of them paying a price. He's been carrying the weight of that lesson, the one he taught his son without meaning to, for 3 decades. John is very still during this, not angry, not performing forgiveness either. This isn't one of those neat movie moments where a speech resolves everything in a single scene. John just listens to his father the way he's been learning to listen to everyone these days, all the way through, without planning his response while the other person is still talking. When Archer finishes, John doesn't say much. But something in his posture changes. Some load that was distributed in a particular way gets redistributed. Archer stays for another hour. They talk about other things, small things, the practice, the girls, a story about something Maya said about her egg. When he leaves, John goes back to his room. He sits on the edge of the bed. Outside in the courtyard, a sparrow lands on the windowsill, glances in, and moves on without a word, apparently deciding that this particular human has enough going on and can be left alone for the afternoon. For the first time since he got here, John almost smiles. Getting out is the easy part, not an escape. John isn't tunneling under fences or bribing orderlies. He's discharged. Properly, officially, with paperwork and a follow-up appointment scheduled, and the psychiatrist's genuine assessment that he's doing well and responding to the process. Which is accurate, in the narrow sense that he answered the right questions consistently and demonstrated stable effect and gave no clinical indication of ongoing crisis. What he gave no clinical indication of is also the thing waiting for him on the sidewalk outside. Lucky is there, sitting at the edge of the parking lot with the patient, unhurried energy of someone who calculated the approximate discharge window and showed up accordingly. No dramatic reunion. Lucky isn't a dramatic reunion kind of dog. He stands up when John comes through the doors, falls into step beside him, and that's that. 2 blocks of walking in comfortable silence before either of them says anything. John speaks first. He says, and this matters, because John does not apologize easily. It isn't something his particular variety of self-containment allows for naturally, that he's sorry. For the part of him that wished the gift away, for the months of resistance and denial and the energy he spent trying to convince himself that Lucky was a temporary measure, and all of this was stress-induced and could be managed back into orderliness if he just applied enough control to it. He's sorry for treating something real like it was a problem to be solved. Lucky takes this in, then says something like, "You're here now." 3 words. John nods once. They keep walking. Jake has maybe days. Lucky has been getting updates through the network the whole time John was in the facility, and the picture he paints is not good. Jake has stopped eating entirely. The headaches have reached a point where he can barely lift his head. The circus has brought a second specialist in, a veterinary neurologist this time, which is progress. But the appointment isn't until the end of the week, and the end of the week may be too late. The blood clot, if that's what it is, isn't waiting for anybody's schedule. John walks faster. Gene Ress is not a brave man. Jeffrey Tambor plays him as someone who has spent his entire career making the safe choice, taking the comfortable path, nodding along in meetings when he should have pushed back, and staying quiet when silence served him better than speaking would. He's not malicious. He's just a man who learned early that rocking the boat has real costs and decided the water was fine where he was sitting. He and John have coexisted at the practice for years without ever fully connecting. Professional respect, polite distance, the particular non-relationship of two people who share a workplace and little else. The conversation John has with him is short. John lays it out plainly, not the talking to animals part. He leaves that architectural detail out for now. A tiger, probable cerebral venous thrombosis, no imaging done, no proper neurological workup, deteriorating fast. He believes he can save the animal if he can get access to imaging equipment and an operating theater. He needs someone with surgical clearance to help him do it. Gene's first response is to list all the reasons this is a terrible idea. John lets him finish. Then Gene lists them again, in a different order. John waits. The thing that shifts Gene isn't a speech, it's a question. John asks him, straight, when the last time was that he made a decision at work that he was actually proud of. Not financially sound, not strategically correct. Just proud of, in the way you're proud of something when you're alone and nobody's watching and you're being honest with yourself. Gene is quiet for a long time. Then he says, "What do I need to bring? Calloway's party is scheduled for Friday evening." Mark has been planning this for weeks. It's the formal celebration of the partnership agreement between the practice and Calloway's health organization, the event where handshakes become signatures and signatures become money, and the thing Mark has been steering toward since the beginning becomes official. The hospital has lent out its executive floor for the occasion, catering, a string quartet, the kind of event that signals that everyone involved is serious and legitimate and absolutely not the sort of people who would smuggle a critically ill tiger through the service entrance at 9 o'clock on a Friday night, which is, of course, exactly when John and Gene plan to do it. The logic is grimly practical. The facility will be full, staffed for an event, and the imaging equipment and theater will be sitting unused while everyone is on the floor above drinking wine and discussing quarterly projections. The chaos of the party is cover. The hospital's attention will be pointed entirely the wrong direction. Lucky points out that this plan has a significant number of variables. John agrees. Lucky asks if John has a contingency for when one of the variables goes wrong. John says they'll figure it out. Lucky, who has watched this man operate under pressure for several months now, accepts this as the honest answer it is. The plan, such as it is, comes together across 48 hours of phone calls and hushed conversations, and one genuinely tense interaction in the practice parking lot where John and Mark nearly have the fight they've been circling for weeks. Mark knows something is happening. He doesn't know the specifics, but he knows John isn't being idle, and whatever John is planning has the potential to blow up the Calloway agreement at the exact moment Mark has it within reach. He tells John to stand down, not unkindly. There's the genuine friendship in it still, the real affection of two people who built something together, but firmly. "Let Jake go," he says. "It's a tiger. It's not worth your career, your license, your marriage, the practice. Walk away." John looks at him for a beat, walks away in the opposite direction. The night before Friday, John goes to see Jake one more time. Jake is lying on his side, and the difference from the first visit is stark. There's a heaviness to him that wasn't there before, a stillness that reads less like rest and more like the body conserving everything it has left. He hears John come in, his eyes track over without his head lifting. John tells him the plan, all of it, the timing, Gene, the party upstairs, the service entrance. He talks through it the way he talks to patients before surgery, covering every step, not because the patient can do anything about it, but because being told what's happening to you matters. It matters to know that someone has thought carefully about your situation and is taking it seriously. Jake listens to all of it. Then he says, "You're going to get in a lot of trouble for this." John says, "Probably. Yeah, worth it?" John doesn't hesitate. Friday. Service entrance, 9 o'clock. Friday arrives like a deadline because it is one. Not for the Calloway agreement, though that's also tonight, also ticking, also attached to consequences neither John nor Mark has fully resolved. For Jake. Every hour that passes without intervention is an hour the clot does more damage. John has done the math, run it and rerun it, and by his best estimate, they have a narrow window tonight, and whatever comes after tonight is a different, worse conversation. The service entrance is around the back of the building. Loading dock. used for catering deliveries, equipment transfers, the ordinary invisible logistics of a functioning hospital. Jean is already there when John arrives, wearing the expression of a man who has made a decision he's not fully made peace with yet and is committed to it anyway. He has the access codes. He's pulled the necessary imaging equipment onto a lower floor theater. He's done all of it quietly, over 2 days, in small enough increments that nobody flagged it. Lucky has coordinated Jake's transport, which is a sentence that still sounds improbable even knowing everything that's happened up to this point. The tiger comes in on a flatbed, sedated lightly, just enough to keep him still for the journey, not enough to deepen the neurological compromise. John monitors his breathing the entire way. Jake's eyes are half open, tracking the ceiling of the service corridor as they move him through. John keeps a hand on the side of his neck, just below the jaw, feeling the pulse. Still there, steady enough. Move faster. Upstairs, glasses are clinking. The executive floor has been transformed for the occasion. Proper event lighting, white tablecloths, Calloway working the room with the practiced ease of a man who has attended 1,000 events exactly like this one. Mark is in his element too, moving from conversation to conversation, the version of himself he becomes when the professional stakes are high and the room is paying attention. He's in the middle of a very important sentence to a very important contact when his phone buzzes. He looks at the message from Jean, and the very important contact gets a polished excuse and an apologetic smile, and Mark Weller is moving toward the elevator before the conversation has technically ended. Mark sees the tiger first. He comes through the theater-level door and stops, and for a moment the full weight of what John has actually done, what Jean has helped him do, in this building, tonight, lands on him all at once. It's one thing to know abstractly that John was planning something. It's another thing to be standing 20 feet away from a sedated 400-pound tiger on a hospital gurney while the imaging equipment hums to life and Jean is already pulling on gloves. The conversation between Mark and Jean is not pleasant. Mark is not wrong about any of the practical points he raises. The liability, the licensing exposure, the surgery they're about to perform on a non-human patient in a facility with no veterinary certification, on a night when the owner of the building is 40 feet above their heads celebrating the purchase of their medical practice. Every single objection Mark has is professionally legitimate. Jean listens to all of it, then says, quietly but without any wobble in it, "I'm scrubbing him." It's the bravest thing Jean Reese has probably ever done in a professional context. Small, in the scale of grand gestures. Enormous, in the scale of who Jean has been for most of his career. Mark stares at him, then at John. John is already focused on Jake, already in the zone that surgeons go into when the decision has been made and the body on the table needs everything you have. He glances at Mark once, briefly, not pleading, just acknowledging. Mark stands in the doorway. What happens next is something that nobody planned and nobody could have choreographed. A nurse from the event floor comes down looking for an ice situation that's gotten complicated. She sees the tiger. She goes back upstairs. And the particular way humans work in groups means that within 6 minutes, a significant portion of Calloway's dinner party is pressing against the glass window of the operating theater, still holding their drinks, looking down at a scene that doesn't fit into any category of thing they expected to see tonight. Calloway is among them. He doesn't say anything for a long time. Just watches John and Jean work, 2 physicians in scrubs moving around a tiger with the same focused efficiency they'd bring to any critical case, talking to each other in the shorthand of people who know what they're doing, monitoring vitals, navigating the imaging, locating exactly what John has been telling. Everyone is there. The clot is there. Right where John said it would be. Archer finds Lisa near the back of the crowd. She's been at the event as a guest. Lisa Dolittle, wife of one of the practice partners, making conversation and wondering why John seemed so tightly wound at dinner last week. Now she's at the window with everyone else, watching her husband perform surgery on a tiger in a hospital basement, and the expression on her face is a complicated mixture of recognition and confusion, and something that looks like it might tip into either laughter or tears. She genuinely isn't sure yet. Archer positions himself beside her and, in the same quiet voice he used in John's room at the facility, starts talking. He tells her about 1968, the dog, the principal, the minister, the decision he made and what it cost his son, and the 30 years of wondering whether he did the right thing. He tells her that John's gift is real, has been real since John was 5 years old, just locked away in the place where things go when a child learns they're not safe to show. He tells her that what she's watching through that window isn't a breakdown or a crisis or a man who lost his grip on reality. It's the opposite. It's John Dolittle finally in full possession of himself. Lisa watches her husband through the glass for a long time without speaking. Then she hands Archer her glass, straightens her jacket, and pushes through the door to the theater floor. She walks up beside John. He looks at her. She doesn't give a speech. She just nods. Once, in the way she nods when she's made a decision, and asks what she can do to help. John tells her to keep talking to Jake, keep him calm, keep him hearing a human voice he can track on. Lisa leans close to Jake's ear and just starts talking. About nothing in particular, about the girls, about Maya's egg and what Maya has now decided to name it, about the time John drove them all to Big Sur and got lost for 2 hours and refused to admit it. Jake's vitals stabilize slightly. The crowd at the window doesn't move. The surgery takes the better part of an hour. John and Jean locate the clot in the great cerebral vein, exactly the location John mapped out based on Jake's symptoms, back before anyone would listen, back when the only diagnostic tool he had was a conversation. They remove it, carefully, methodically, the way you do something that can't be undone if you rush it. Lisa keeps talking throughout. Calloway watches from above without leaving. When it's over, John steps back. Jake breathes, deeper than before, slower. The particular breathing of a body that's been under tremendous strain and has just had the source of that strain removed. John puts a hand on Jake's flank and feels the rib cage rise and fall and rise again. It worked. Jean lets out a breath. He's apparently been holding since the incision. Somewhere above them, behind the glass, someone starts clapping. Then more people. The sound is muffled, filtered through the window, but it's unmistakably what it is. A room full of people in formal wear applauding a tiger surgery at a business dinner, which is genuinely one of the more specific things that has ever happened in this building. Mark, still standing in the doorway where he's been for the last hour, puts his hands in his pockets and says nothing. But he doesn't leave either. The aftermath sorts itself out over the following days in ways that are messier and more human than a clean movie resolution, which is part of what I like about how this all lands. Calloway, moved by something he can't quite categorize, withdraws the aggressive terms of the purchase offer. The practice stays independent. Mark, who has watched Jean grow a spine overnight and John save a tiger's life through a combination of sheer conviction and skills nobody knew he had, goes quieter than usual for a week, and then starts making different kinds of decisions. Not a transformation, a recalibration. Jean frames absolutely nothing from that night, because that would be professionally inadvisable. But he carries himself differently afterward. You can just tell. Jake recovers fully, makes it back to the circus on a modified schedule which he has negotiated through John, who has apparently become the unofficial interspecies labor attorney for the greater San Francisco animal community. Lisa and John have the real conversation, the one that the kitchen table version was always a preliminary sketch of. She wants to know everything. John tells her everything. It takes a while. She asks good questions. He answers them honestly. Lucky sits nearby and pointedly does not contribute because he understands the difference between conversations that need a third party and conversations that don't. Carice, who has absorbed the events of the past several weeks with the observational precision of a teenager who misses nothing while pretending to miss everything, tells her friend that her dad is actually kind of extraordinary. She uses the word kind of because she is 16 and has standards to maintain. Maya's egg hatches. It is not a swan. Nobody is surprised. Maya is unfazed. Here's the thing this movie keeps coming back to, underneath all the comedy and the animal voices and the Eddie Murphy charisma that makes every scene feel lighter than it probably is on paper. It's about the cost of not listening, not to animals specifically, to the things inside you that keep trying to communicate, the instincts and gifts and fundamental truths about who you are that get trained out of you when you're young enough to believe that being yourself is a liability. John Dolittle spent 30 years being extremely competent at a version of himself that wasn't quite the whole version. He was a good doctor who could have been a great one. He was a present husband who could have been a fully honest one. He was a decent father who could have been the kind of father his daughters would tell stories about. All it took was a dog who wouldn't shut up, a tiger who needed someone to actually hear him, and a father brave enough, eventually, to say I was wrong. Not a bad deal for a summer comedy. Is this video connected with something for you? If you grew up loving this movie, or you're watching it for the first time because someone sent you this video, or you just have a soft spot for Norm Macdonald voicing a sarcastic stray, drop a comment below. Tell me your favorite animal. Tell me what you thought of Jake. Tell me whether you cried at the window scene, because I know some of you did. Subscribe if you want more of these long-form breakdowns. New one coming soon. Lucky would want you to.